I contacted a lawyer first. Not just any lawyer, a criminal attorney who specialized in cold cases. Her name was Sarah Chen, and when I told her what I had, she looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and fierce determination. "This evidence could reopen the case," she said, examining the files Marcus had extracted. "But I need to warn you, this will change everything. Your family will never be the same. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my grandmother's words, "Be stronger than I was." I'm prepared. Sarah contacted the police. Within a week, I was sitting in an interrogation room, not as a suspect but as a witness, explaining how I'd found the microchip. Detectives pulled the old case files. Catherine Ashford's disappearance had been investigated as a missing person case, then gradually gone cold. They'd never had a body, never had enough evidence to call it a murder. Now they did. The investigation moved quickly after that. They exhumed my grandfather's grave, not for his body, but to search his property, which had been sold after his death. They found forensic evidence that matched the crime scene photos. Catherine's body was discovered buried on what had been the estate's grounds, exactly where the documentation suggested. My phone started ringing. First my father, his voice shaking with confusion and anger. "What have you done? The police are asking about Dad. They're talking about murder. What the hell is going on?" I told him everything. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "You're lying. Dad would never—" "I have the evidence, Dad. Photos, video, Grandma's confession, all of it." "Then Grandma was crazy, senile. This is insane." "It's the truth." He hung up. He didn't call back for 3 weeks. The story broke nationwide. Respected businessman linked to decades-old murder. The media descended on our family like locusts. Reporters camped outside my apartment, outside my parents' house. Every aspect of my grandfather's life was dissected. The company he'd built was investigated and found to have been involved in exactly what Catherine had been exposing. My family fractured. Some believed me, understood why I'd come forward. Most didn't. My father stopped speaking to me entirely. My aunt called me a traitor. At a family gathering I wasn't invited to, they apparently discussed legally disowning me. But then I got a letter. It was from Margaret, Catherine's sister. Her handwriting was shaky, emotional. "Dear name, I don't have adequate words to thank you for what you've done. For 38 years I've wondered where my sister was, what happened to her, if she suffered. You've given me answers I thought I'd never have. You've given me the chance to finally bring Catherine home and lay her to rest. I know what this must have cost you. To turn against your own family to expose such terrible truths, that takes a kind of courage most people will never possess. Your grandmother knew that about you. She trusted you to do what was right even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Catherine spent her life seeking truth and justice. She died for it, and you've honored her memory in a way that means everything to those of us who loved her. She didn't die in vain. Her story is finally being told. Thank you. Thank you from the depths of my heart. You've given my family peace." I cried reading that letter. I cried in a way I hadn't allowed myself to since this all started, because it made it real. The cost, but also the reason. Catherine Ashford wasn't just a name in a cold case file. She was someone's sister, someone's daughter, someone who'd mattered. The trial happened 9 months later. My grandfather couldn't be prosecuted. He was dead. But the case was officially closed as a solved homicide. Catherine's remains were returned to her family. They held a funeral, and they invited me. I almost didn't go. What right did I have to be there, the granddaughter of her killer? But Margaret insisted. So I stood in the back of the church as they finally said goodbye to Catherine Ashford, journalist, truth seeker, sister, friend. And I realized that sometimes justice is more important than family loyalty. Sometimes doing the right thing means losing everything you thought you knew about the people you loved. My grandmother had known that. She'd spent 38 years in a prison of her own making, silent and complicit, until she found the courage to pass the burden to someone who could bear it. The necklace had been more than a family heirloom. It was a confession, a plea for redemption, a final act of courage from a woman who'd spent most of her life being afraid. After the funeral, Margaret approached me. She took my hands in hers and she said, "Your grandmother would be proud of you, and so would Catherine. I still have the necklace. I wear it sometimes, though now the locket contains photographs, one of my grandmother and one of Catherine Ashford, smiling in a photo from before she died. Two women who never met, but whose lives became forever intertwined through secrets and truth. My father eventually called. We talked for hours. He's slowly coming to terms with who his father really was, with the man behind the mask. Some of my family have reached out, apologized for their initial reactions. Some never will. And I've made peace with that. Because here's what I've learned. Family is complicated. Love doesn't erase wrongdoing. And sometimes the people who raise us, who we think we know completely, are capable of things we can't imagine. But that doesn't change our responsibility to truth, to justice, to the people who've been silenced. My grandmother gave me a choice in her final act. She could have destroyed the evidence, taken the secret to her grave, let sleeping dogs lie. But she didn't. She chose to trust me with the truth, knowing it would change everything. And I chose to speak it. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I'd never opened that locket, if I'd just worn the necklace without discovering its secret. Maybe I'd still have Sunday dinners with my extended family. Maybe my father and I would still be close. Maybe my grandfather's legacy would remain untarnished. But Catherine Ashford would still be missing. Her family would still be wondering. And I would be complicit in a silence that protected the guilty at the expense of the innocent. So I'd make the same choice again. Every time. Because some things matter more than family comfort. Truth matters. Justice matters. And the voices of the silenced matter most of all. The necklace that destroyed my family also freed it. Freed us from living in the shadow of a lie. From building our lives on a foundation of blood. It was the hardest gift anyone has ever given me. And the most important choice I've ever made. My grandmother knew I would be strong enough to carry it. And in the end, maybe that's the greatest inheritance of all. Not wealth or status or family name, but the courage to do what's right, even when everything in you wants to turn away. Especially then. I never wanted the necklace. When my grandmother died and left it to me in her will, I remember feeling nothing but confusion. We weren't close. She'd always been distant, cold even, and in the months before she passed, she'd looked at me with something that felt like fear. So, when the lawyer handed me a small velvet box containing an antique silver necklace with an ornate locket, I thought maybe this was her way of apologizing for all the years of silence between us. The necklace was beautiful, in a haunting sort of way. Victorian era, probably, with intricate engravings of roses and thorns winding around the locket. Inside, there was supposed to be space for 2 photographs, but when I opened it, I found something else entirely. A tiny compartment I'd almost missed, and nestled inside, smaller than my pinky nail, was a microchip. My hands started shaking the moment I saw it. This wasn't normal. People didn't hide microchips in antique necklaces unless they were hiding something. And my grandmother, with her careful manners and her secrets, had gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure this chip found its way to me specifically. I took it to my friend Marcus, who worked in data recovery. I trusted him, and I needed someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. He looked at the chip under a magnifier, then at me, his expression serious. "This is military-grade encryption," he said. "Whatever's on here, someone wanted it protected. Are you sure you want to know?" I wasn't sure, but I nodded anyway. It took him 3 days to crack it. 3 days of me barely sleeping, barely eating, my mind spinning with possibilities. What could my grandmother have hidden that required this level of security? Family secrets? Financial records? Something from her past? When Marcus called me back to his apartment, his face was pale. "You need to see this," he said, pulling up files on his computer. "But I'm warning you, this is bad. Really bad." The screen filled with photographs, crime scene photographs. A woman lying on the floor of what looked like a study, blood pooled around her head. The images were dated March 15, 1987, 38 years ago. Along with the photos were audio files, documents, even video footage from what appeared to be a hidden camera. "Who is she?" I whispered. Marcus pulled up a document. According to this, her name was Catherine Ashford. She was a journalist. And according to these files, she was murdered. I felt the room tilt. Why would my grandmother have this? "Keep watching." He played one of the video files. The quality was grainy, but I could make out 2 figures in the study. The woman, Catherine, was backing away from someone, her hands raised. The other person's face was turned from the camera, but I could hear their voice, clear and cold. "You should have stayed out of it, now you've left me no choice." Then came the sound that would haunt me for weeks. A single gunshot. Catherine fell, and the figure turned just slightly, enough for the camera to catch their profile. I stopped breathing. "Marcus, zoom in on their face." He did, and there, frozen in grainy footage from 1987, was my grandfather, the man I'd loved, who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd made pancakes every Sunday morning, who'd died 5 years ago as a respected businessman and community pillar. My grandfather was a murderer. "There's more," Marcus said quietly. He pulled up a document. "Your grandmother wrote this. It's dated a week before she died." I read her words, written in the shaky handwriting of someone who knew their time was running out. "To my granddaughter, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I've carried this burden for 38 years and I can't take it with me to the grave, knowing that justice was never served. Your grandfather killed Catherine Ashford because she was investigating his company's illegal activities. She had evidence that would have destroyed him, sent him to prison for decades. So he destroyed her instead. I found out by accident. I found the tape, the photos, everything he'd kept as some kind of insurance policy. When I confronted him, he told me that if I ever spoke a word, he'd make sure I disappeared too. So I stayed silent. I raised our children in a house built on blood money. I smiled at dinner parties and charity galas while knowing what he'd done. I became complicit in my silence. But you're different. You're brave in ways I never was. So I'm giving you a choice I never gave myself. Speak the truth, no matter the cost. Catherine's family never knew what happened to her. Her case went cold. She deserves justice, even if it's 38 years late. Do what I couldn't. Be stronger than I was." I read those words 3 times, each time feeling like I was falling deeper into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My entire family history was a lie. Every memory with my grandfather was now tainted with the knowledge of what he'd done. And my grandmother, the woman I'd thought was cold and distant, had been carrying this terrible secret, protecting me from the truth while also preparing me to bear it. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. I didn't know. Going to the police meant destroying my family's reputation. My father, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, everyone would be touched by this. The family business my grandfather had built would be investigated. Everything we owned might be seized as proceeds of crime. Our name would become synonymous with murder. But Catherine Ashford's family had spent 38 years wondering what happened to their daughter, their sister, their friend. They'd never gotten closure, never gotten answers. I took the microchip home that night, locked it in my safe, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The necklace lay on my nightstand, the locket open, empty now of its terrible cargo. I thought about my grandmother wearing this around her neck for years, the weight of that secret literally hanging over her heart. I thought about calling my father, but what would I say? "Dad, I found evidence that Grandpa was a murderer." How do you drop that bomb on someone? Instead, I started researching Catherine Ashford. I found old newspaper articles about her disappearance. She'd been 32, an investigative journalist working for a major newspaper. She'd been looking into corporate fraud. Then she'd simply vanished. The last person known to see her was her editor, who said she was working on the story of her career. She'd been right. The story would have been explosive. My grandfather's company had been involved in illegal weapons sales, money laundering, connections to organized crime. Catherine had gathered evidence, was days away from publishing. Then she was gone. I found her family. Her younger sister, Margaret, was still alive, now in her 60s. I found an interview she'd given on the 20th anniversary of Catherine's disappearance. Not knowing is the hardest part. I just want to bring my sister home. That's when I knew what I had to do.